Is there a new king afoot when it comes to Bitcoin hardware wallets? Today, we are going to look at the Foundation Devices Passport and may just find out. Let's jump in. Welcome back to another video. My name is Ian Major. I'm an entrepreneur, Bitcoin pleb, and all-around raging capitalist. And yes, I have been excited to do this video for quite some time to go into the Foundation Devices Passport. If you've never heard of this, it is a newer Bitcoin hardware wallet with a ton of amazing features. I'm going to go through the sort of history of how this came to be, some of the controversies surrounding it, but then ultimately we're going to spend today going through a full walkthrough of the device from setup to connecting it with, in this case, Sparrow Wallet, and using it to send and receive funds. So you won't want to miss a thing because this thing is elite. For those returning to the channel, welcome back, my friends. As always, it is no less than a thrilling pleasure to have you. And for those new to the channel, I welcome you as well. I know there are many of you, in fact. There are about 80% of you watching right this very moment who are not currently subscribed. And so if you like this content, I invite you to consider subscribing and join us in our merry gang in cyberspace. I cover all manner of Bitcoin-related content, including wallet tutorials like this, hardware, software, mining, node operation, Lightning Network, DeFi on Bitcoin, news analysis. You say it, I cover it. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump in. And before we go into the actual deep dive walkthrough, I want to just cover high level some of the context and kind of overall, features of the device we'll be looking at. All right, so firstly, there's actually a pretty funny story about this. So in the June 2021 Miami Bitcoin conference, myself and a business partner were presenting at one of the booths, and it turns out we were actually right next to the guys over at Foundation Devices. And I remember, it was so busy both of those days, we didn't really have the chance to connect too much, but I remember looking over and thinking like, oh, these look pretty slick. And so who would have known? I had no idea at the time. So that is pretty cool stuff. But there's also some interesting context within the broader community behind Foundation Devices. There's a bit of controversy because so Cold Card, and I've done videos on Cold Card. I love the Cold Card and all of CoinKite's products. But apparently Foundation Devices forked some of the code that goes into some of the firmware that goes into the Cold Card. And there's nothing wrong with this, right? The sort of open source nature of what Cold Card had at the time allowed for this. But basically Foundation Devices, forked some of the code and of course added a lot of other stuff themselves in order to create this new product that they're now marketing and selling. And so interestingly, Cold Card came out and condemned Foundation Devices a little bit. And this was pretty interesting. Again, I highly, highly respect the folks at CoinKite and the Cold Card as a wonderful piece of technology. But it's interesting the steps that they've taken, right? So they came out against Foundation Devices for forking, what was open source code. And indeed, if you go all the way back, Cold Card certainly took some of the code from Trezor, right? And so there's this kind of lineage stemming all the way back to Trezor that I think each has sort of built upon. And Cold Card has actually altered their license structure a bit to prevent against kind of similar commercial forks for some of their code base. And so it's actually kind of interesting. There's a lot of FOSS proponents who have now really kind of flocked towards Foundation Devices. A lot of you watching may not care at all about what I'm saying, but I do think it's important to sort of see the ethos behind these different teams that are building this. But beyond that sort of pure open source kind of status, As you will see, the foundation device has a absolutely beautiful kind of interface. Easy to use screen, easy to use sort of keypad. It looks like a kind of old school Nokia phone, which really helps with OPSEC. If you were fleeing a country and, the airport looked at this device, they'd throw it right back. They wouldn't know what it was. It looks like an old phone, but it is pretty slick. And in addition to, it's fully air gapped, right? So this thing does not connect to any internet connected device ever. But in addition to micro SD cards that can pass information back and forth from your hardware wallet to the computer, it also supports QR codes, which are wildly more convenient than the micro SD route. And it has all the kind of great bells and whistles in terms of security that we have appreciated, that I've appreciated in the Cold Card and others. It's made in the US and has a sort of supply chain verification feature as part of the setup, which is really nice. And they've really thought of just about kind of every possible attack vector for someone, trying to get your funds. And so very cool stuff. I'm also super impressed with the interoperability that it has already with a number of leading desktop and even mobile wallets. And so it's pretty clear the community has reacted quite favorably to this. With all that context out of the way, let's jump in and actually see what this puppy looks like. All right, so let's jump into the fun stuff. So starting off, foundationdevices.com is where you will find this. I will, of course, link everything here in the description down below. But this is where you can come and order the product if you're so interested, learn more about it. But let's take a look at what I have received. So I've unboxed the initial sort of outermost layer and box, and it came very nicely sealed and packaged. And inside I have a few things. I have this very slick pocket version of the Bitcoin white paper, which is really cool. I'll open this up real quick. And so I'm pretty sure this is a kind of limited time sort of special thing for the first however many of these that are sold. But it is very cool. It is the unedited white paper in sort of pocket form. So that is pretty slick. You also get this nice kind of card that has a QR code for the setup. Nice personal note from the team, as well as some of the early kind of mock-ups of the device design, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, you get a little bit of swag, some foundation stickers. I guess it goes like that. So cool stuff. But the real meat that, of course, we care about is the device itself. And so in this box is where we'll be looking. So I'll unwrap this real quick. All right, and then this void if broken sticker is designed to be a pain. So if you start picking at it, it is really difficult to get off. So just take a knife and kind of slide through that. And again, this is nice, right? It makes it really super obvious if this was tampered with in any way as it was making its way to you. And there it is. So pretty sleek looking. I know the lighting in here is not great at this angle, but pretty cool. So let's take this guy out. So we've got you can see it's pretty small. It's pretty small, and it could easily pass as a old school phone. So you can see it's got the screen. It has the arrow buttons, and then the kind of selector buttons are these two. And then what's really nice is you've got the kind of old school, the old school way of sort of typing out more lengthy passphrases or different things like that. What you also get in the box are a couple AAA batteries. So that is nice. This is what we will, this is a battery powered device. So again, it does not plug into anything. And lastly, you get a couple of micro SD cards. So you get two industrial 8 gig micro SD cards. That is really, really nice that they include this. You will see the price point is, it's certainly up there. So let's get these batteries in. This shell basically is metallic, so it comes right off like that. And so I'll insert the batteries like so. You can, of course, as I was just showing, you can see the camera. So this is what is going to scan QR codes, which is an unbelievably convenient feature, as opposed to kind of passing the micro SD back and forth. Although you do, of course, have that option if you so prefer it, using the micro SD slot here at the top of the device. So we are now ready to power this on. What I'm going to do is hit this bottom left button, which has a little, it has the X symbol, but it also has the power button. So I'm going to hold that for about half a second, and you'll see it turns right on. And it says, congratulations on taking the first step towards sovereignty and ownership over your Bitcoin. Open the setup guide by scanning the QR code on the following screen. So I'll hit continue. And this presents me with actually the same QR code that you get on this little piece of paper. So these are the same, essentially goes to the same setup process. Okay, so it turns out this actually just takes you to the handy setup guide that they have. So again, I'll link this in the description down below, support.foundationdevices.com/setup guide. But this basically goes through, unboxing, which we just did, powering on, et cetera, et cetera. So let me come back to the device. I'll go ahead and hit next. Please accept our terms of use. You can read the full terms in the Passport setup guide. So again, I have them here. And these are pretty standard. It mostly goes through that you are solely responsible for your funds, right? It's not Foundation Devices' fault if you do anything stupid. So that's basically that. So we'll go ahead and hit continue. I confirm that I have read and accept the terms of use. And so it says, next, let's make sure your passport has not been tampered with during shipping. The setup guide will direct you to a page containing a QR code. So this is really nice. This is basically the supply chain verification I was talking about earlier. And so what I'm going to do is come back to the setup guide, and I have this supply chain validation. So Passport stores a supply chain private key in the secure element, which is very cool. And so I'm going to hit the supply chain validation. And now I'm going to scan this QR code with my Passport device. So I just need to scroll down, and it's scanning. Okay, great. And so now that I've scanned that code, I'm presented with 4 words on my Passport device that it's now asking me to put in. Okay, so there we go. It says success. Your Passport passed validation. You can now press the valid button on Passport. And so I will do that. Okay, the next step is to set a PIN. So it says now it's time to set your 6 to 12 digit PIN. There is no way to recover a lost PIN or reset Passport. Please record your PIN somewhere safe. I'll hit continue. And so I'm going to go ahead and start entering my PIN. Now, you'll notice when you do the first 4 digits, it will actually present you with 2 security words. And you've probably seen this in other hardware wallets, but these are basically words that should be familiar or that will become familiar to you, such that every time you're powering on the device and putting in your PIN, it's going to present you with these 2 words. And if they're not the 2 words that you're familiar with, you know that something's wrong. And this is a very common attack type. It may sound far-fetched, but imagine, a world where these become way more common, and you have it in your backpack or something, and someone swaps out your device for another. If you are putting your PIN in and you see these different words, you know that something has gone wrong. So just, jot down these 2 security words and then continue on with building your PIN. All right, so it's saving my PIN now that I've put it in. And now I'm presented with the sort of main menu upon starting. So you have a few options: create a new seed, which is what we will do in this case. However, you can also restore a seed in 2 different ways. One would be by typing in your mnemonic phrase, so your 12 or 24 typically word seed phrase, or through the backup option, you can put a micro SD that has a wallet backup in it. So we'll actually show what that looks like in a little bit. And there's some settings here that let you change things like the screen brightness, change your PIN, etc. Now, before we jump right in and create a new seed, we actually want to check the firmware. So the firmware is essentially the version of the sort of software that's running on this device. So let's go ahead and hit select and go to the current version to check what version we're on. And so this looks quite out of date. So current firmware v1.0.1, which is interesting. I ordered this like not too long ago, so this must be from an early production batch. And so we definitely will want to set this up because, as you can see in the setup guide, if we come all the way down, so we've done the pin setup, updating the firmware, we're already on version 1.0.7. So we definitely want to update this because we are way behind on our actual device. So what we can do is we'll update the firmware. And to do this, what we're going to do is I'm going to put a micro SD card. So first, let's download the firmware. So you can do that right from this link. And I now have this bin file that you can see that's been downloaded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my micro SD cards. I'm going to put it in my computer. I'm going to drag the bin file onto it, and then we'll come right back and put it into the device. Okay, so I've got the micro SD with the 1.0.7 firmware bin file on it. And so what I'm now going to do is go to update firmware. So I'll hit select, and it says please insert a micro SD card. So I will do that. Make sure the gold bars are facing towards you and put it right in the top like so. Make sure it's in there. I'll go ahead and hit continue. I'll do update firmware. On the next screen, select the firmware file that you want to install. So I'll hit continue. And indeed, there is the 1.0.7 bin file. I will hit select. Please make sure your passport is backed up before proceeding. Are you sure you want to update the firmware? So again, if I had already had some funds on here, I would just want to make doubly sure that I have that all backed up. And so I will scroll and say yes. So it is now updating the device. And you can see it is now restarting with the updated firmware. Okay, so it's now rebooted. It's asking me for my PIN, so I will put that in. And after the first 4 digits, it is presenting me with those security words. I do recognize them, so I will hit confirm and then finish putting my PIN in and hit enter. And so it's verifying my PIN. And there we go. So we can confirm that everything went as expected. If I go to settings, select firmware and current version, and we can see we are on 1.0.7. All right. So let's come back and we'll now go up and create a new seed. Go ahead and hit select. And it is generating and saving the seed. It says, now let's create a backup of your seed. We recommend backing up Passport to the 2 included micro SD cards. Experienced users can always view and record the 24-word seed in the advanced settings menu. So I would honestly probably recommend doing both as long as you're keeping the 24 words in a secure place. I think a lot of folks would sort of appreciate that method in addition to having it backed up on a micro SD card. So I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. Passport is about to create your first encrypted micro SD because I've got my card in here. If you didn't have it in there, it would sort of say insert a card. So I've got the micro SD. Passport is about to create your first encrypted micro SD backup. The next screen will show you the password that is required to access the backup. So this means that if this micro SD for whatever reason is stolen or you lose it, someone else gets it, they won't be able to decrypt it without the password that is attached to it. So that is nice. We recommend storing the backup password in cloud storage or a password manager, and etc. All right, so you'll see there are the 6 backup passwords. So I'll go ahead and write them down, and then it'll quiz me for each of them. All right, so I've written them down. I'll hit next, and it's going to sort of quiz me. So I'll go through and do that now. Okay, so you'll see that the backup has now been saved in a backups folder to my micro SD. So we'll go ahead and hit continue. It says, do you want to make an additional backup? If so, insert another micro SD card. I'm actually good for now, but again, you could do that if you wanted to have it in multiple locations. So I'll go ahead and hit no, and setup complete. So I'll take the micro SD out for now. All right, and we are good. So we're now in our wallet, essentially. Now you're probably wondering, well, where are those 24 words? You can always come down to settings and go to select, and then go to advanced, and go to view seed words. So that's how you would get to your full 24 words that you can write down as you'd like. This is also where you can add an optional passphrase. So this is nice. I mean, think of this like a 25th word almost. And so you can, set the passphrase and change it to your heart's content. I would recommend doing that. You can also change the PIN, etc. So let's come back. Again, there's all sorts of other pieces here as well in the settings menu. All right, so now that we've got our seed backed up, we are ready to pair our device with a wallet. So think of this as, we need to connect our hardware device to software that allows us to interface with the wallet. And so this is, the way things are with Coldcard as well. And so fortunately, Passport has a wide range of options. If you go to the Pair Wallet menu and hit select, you can see all sorts of supported options. Bitcoin Core, you've got Blue Wallet, which is very cool. I'll do a future video on that, which is a mobile wallet. BTC Pay, you can connect it to Electrum, Sparrow, Spectre, and Wasabi. In our case today, we are going to do Sparrow. If you haven't checked out one of my recent videos, I've actually gone into Sparrow in depth. I think it is a really, really terrific desktop wallet for Bitcoin, packed with features, and I'll probably do more videos on it in the future. But what we'll do is go ahead and boot up Sparrow on my computer. And in this case, I actually don't want the existing one. What we want to do is go to the File menu and hit Import Wallet. So shout out to my goofy setup that you can clearly see here. I've got like my phone position so I can view everything. But basically what we want to do, and shout out to Sparrow for this broad range of options. You can see there's a ton of different options here. We want to come down to the Passport, and we'll go ahead and scan. And this is essentially opening up my computer camera to scan what's on my Passport. So we are sort of truly in Inception now. But I'll come here and hit select on Sparrow, and I will do a single SIG setup. Again, in a future video, it could be cool to look at some of the multi-SIG support. I'll select this, and I'll select the QR code option. Now you can, of course, do that by micro SD. I just think QR codes are way simpler. And so I'll hit select, and what's going to happen is it will generate a scrolling QR code that I will then put up on my computer's camera for it to scan. All right, I take it all back. No, I'm kidding. So I was trying for some time there to get Sparrow to read it. I was able to successfully scan the QR code and pair it with my Blue Wallet from my mobile phone. So that leads me to believe that perhaps my computer's camera is just, for whatever reason, not high def enough, or I don't know. But nonetheless, we will forge onwards. And so in this case, we're just going to be forced to do this with the micro SD. So instead of, if I come back to our little pairing menu here, so instead of, I'll go to Sparrow and single sig, and instead of QR code, I will do micro SD. So I'm going to put in the micro SD again. So I've got the micro SD in. I will go ahead and hit select. It says next, Passport will save a JSON file to your micro SD card to use with Sparrow. So we'll hit continue. And success. So saved file to your micro SD card, blah, 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 sparrow.json. So I'll hit continue. And now I'm going to remove this and get it connected to my laptop. Okay, so I've got my micro SD in my computer. I will go ahead and instead of scan, womp, I will do import file. And I'll go down to the drive that's in, which is this guy. And you'll see there's our backups folder that we created earlier, and I've got this Sparrow JSON file. So I'll go ahead and hit open. I will leave that as the default, and I'll go ahead and hit import. All right, so we'll give a name for the wallet. So maybe we do passport test, and we'll create the wallet. It asks if I want to add a password to the wallet. You'd want to do this, even though it is a hardware wallet, and so that provides a level of protection. You'd want to add this. I, for now, am going to say no password, just because this is a sort of test run of this. And here we go. And so if you've seen my other video on Sparrow, this will look very familiar. You've got the main interface where you can see your transactions, send, receive, addresses, manage your UTXOs, and more. Now, you'll also notice it says the next step as you're pairing this up is to verify addresses. So next, let's check that the wallet was paired successfully. Generate a new receive address in Sparrow and scan the QR code on the next page. So I will go over here to Sparrow and I'll do the receive option. And so I've got my QR code and the address here. And now I'll come back to my device and say continue. And then I will scan the QR code. And it says pairing complete. So there you go. My phone's camera was good. The Passport device's camera was good. I think it's just my my laptop, unfortunately. So let me know what you guys find. If your laptop camera is able to read that in from the Passport device. But all is well. So we are now officially paired between the device and the Sparrow interface. And so now we can start receiving and sending funds, just like we would anything else. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to use this address that we just looked at to receive some Bitcoin, and I will be back after that transaction confirms. All right, so we've got our test transaction. I just sent this from another Sparrow wallet. You can see it's got a few confirmations. So again, I'm not going to go through kind of all the detail of Sparrow itself. I've done that in another video. But here we can see that transaction that's come in. I can see it also mirrored in my UTXOs here. And so that's great. Now to wrap this up, we can show how to send it. So again, all we did for receive was just generate a receive address just as we normally would. So Sparrow as our interface for our Passport device can be used to receive funds. To send it, we're going to need the Passport device itself because that is where the private keys are that will sign the transaction. So if I come over to send, I'm going to paste in an address that, again, I've got from a different Sparrow wallet. And there we go. And then I'll say, test 2, something like that. And I'll send the max that I have. So that was basically the 50,000 sats minus the fees. And so, this is mostly the interface of Sparrow. You'll see that you have a sliding scale for how aggressive you want to be with your fees. I do think the mempool has picked up as the price action today is going pretty crazy. But we're in no particular rush, so we'll just leave it here. We could even drag it to be less high priority if we really wanted. But this is fine, and it'll just visualize the inputs and outputs of the transaction. And so we'll go ahead and hit create transaction. Now I'm going to try one last time to see if the QR code method will work here, i.e. my computer's camera scanning the device. But if that doesn't work, we'll just go the micro SD route. So let's go ahead and say show QR. So this is basically going to bring up a QR that I can scan, and you'll see it's sort of rotating. Now, what I want to do is in my passport device, I want to say sign with QR code. So I'll hit select, and I'll scan this, and boom, passport device is on point here. So there's the amount that I'm sending as well as the destination. I can hit continue. There is no change amount, and there is the fee. So it plays back all the details. I can go ahead and hit sign, and now what will happen is the passport device will display a fully signed Bitcoin transaction that I can then present to my computer photo or Sparrow camera with the Sparrow, which will then take the fully signed Bitcoin transaction and will broadcast it to the network. So that's what's happening. Sparrow is presenting a partially signed Bitcoin transaction. I am now signing it with my device, and then we'll convey that information back to Sparrow. So let's go ahead and hit sign. And now I've got a fully signed Bitcoin transaction on my device. So I can hit cancel from here. And now I'm going to say scan QR. So let's see if it works. I'm not too hopeful. All right, so alas, it didn't work. So again, I think my computer camera is just too crappy. So that's a consideration. I think this is a huge part of the convenience, the sort of incremental convenience you can get from the passport device. But that is all fine. We'll go ahead and instead we're going to use the micro SD option. So there you go. You know, silver lining here, we get to show both methods for conducting partially signed Bitcoin transactions. We just showed what the QR method would be like, but let's go ahead and say save partially signed Bitcoin transaction. And so we'll go ahead down to our USB drive, and I'll say test 2 is fine. I'll go ahead and hit save. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my micro SD card out of my computer and put it into the device. Okay, so I've got the micro SD with the partially signed Bitcoin transaction file on my in my device. So now instead of the QR code option, I'll just say sign with micro SD. I'll hit select, and it is reading. And indeed, it has read the correct information. It sees the amount, the destination, no change amount, and the fee. So we have all the same information exactly as we had it. We can go ahead and hit sign. And it says updated partially signed Bitcoin transaction is test2-signed.psbt. Finalized transaction ready for broadcast. So again, structurally the same thing just happened. We ingested a partially signed Bitcoin transaction from Sparrow into the device. We signed that file with our device, and now we're going to send it back to Sparrow to broadcast to the network. And we see all the final kind of goodies. So I'll hit continue, and we can take this out, and I'll put it back in my computer. All right, we're at the home stretch. So now we can load the partially signed Bitcoin transaction, and I'll go down to our handy USB drive, and you will now see that I have this test2 signed, actually it's the final one that I want, transaction. So I'll hit this and hit open, and there we go. You can see that the signatures are good. and I can now broadcast the transaction to the network. And there you go. So again, bit of a shame that we found that limitation with it's an us problem with our computer camera, but nonetheless, we were able to show how to set this up, how to pair the device with Sparrow, and then the different methods for sending funds either through the QR code method or the micro SD, both partially signed Bitcoin transactions. And so there you have it. There's a few other small pieces that I just want to call out. If you come down to settings and I'm just going to do this for illustrative purposes. I'm going to go to advanced and say erase passport. So what this does is it literally wipes the passport. What will be preserved is your PIN, so for entering the device itself. But the erase passport will essentially wipe the wallet. And so I'll hit select and says, are you sure you want to erase this passport? All funds will be lost if not backed up. So I'll say yes because I have my backup. Without a proper backup, this action will cause you to lose all funds associated with this device. Please confirm that you understand these risks, and I do. And so it will now restart, and you'll see that we basically come back to the screen. I'll put my pin in. And so we're basically back to square one. So if I wanted to, I could restore that wallet we were just working with through either the restore seed option, and I would put in the 24 words that you can get from the advanced menu in settings, or I can restore from a backup. So I would just put that micro SD back into the device that we had saved the backup file on previously, and it would restore that back in. So there you have it. We'll go ahead now and close this video out. All right, so there you have it, my friends. We covered a lot of ground, as always, in these tutorials. Just as a quick recap, we went into a bit of the background behind Foundation Devices, not just the fact that we were booth neighbors at the Miami Bitcoin conference in June, but this kind of interesting history around the cold card. But despite all of that, you really do love to see this beacon of FOSS, free open source software. And we also saw how sleek of a device it is. How nicely it pairs up to something like Sparrow Wallet that we used in this case to pair up with the hardware wallet. We looked at how to send, receive, create your backups, restore backups, etc. And so I'm going to be honest, I'm going to let you guys do your own sort of decisioning, but I think I may have to give the nod to the Passport, the newly crowned king, at least in my mind, when it comes to Bitcoin hardware wallets. But what do you think? I am curious to hear. And more generally, I hope you found this valuable and interesting. If you did, you already know what to do. Give this video a like, comment below with your thoughts about this video, but also videos you may like to see in the future. I really do take that into account when creating the schedule for the channel, as many of you know. But for now, we'll go ahead and leave this video here. As always, my friends, every sat counts. And until next time, I'll see you then.